Hello and welcome to RJ Sanderson TV. We're back for a big September edition and we can't do it without Roy Sanderson. Roy, welcome back to the studio. Welcome back to RJ Sanderson TV. How have the last few months been for you?
Yeah, been good. Love spring. It's a wonderful time of the year. AFL finals. Everybody's up and about, eh?
It is. It's a fantastic time. The racing's also about to kick off in a big way. It's a fantastic time of the year to be in Melbourne. And we're going to find out whether it's a fantastic time economically as we get into our headlines and check out what's happening in the economy. Because, Roy, there is some interesting times at the moment. When we were last here in June, there was perhaps a state of flux as to whether to be optimistic or pessimistic. Let's have a look at GDP first up, as gross domestic product is a measure of growth. And I think this is an indicator that is causing a lot of concern at the moment because, as you can see there, growth is flatlining at the moment.
It is, and arguably that could be a negative GDP if it wasn't for the immigration levels since COVID. So the government are supporting and pushing immigration simply because they need it for GDP.
Growth numbers coming out of the US recently suggesting that they actually beat expectations. So I think the other part of this, Roy, that's concerning is that usually, and we'll see this in some other slides as well, Australia mimics broadly international conditions, but here we are trailing behind in growth comparatively to some other places in the world. Is there any particular fix that you think on growth?
I think this is a reason for the government, or the Reserve Bank, I should say, to look at reducing interest rates. And there's been talk about whether that will happen before Christmas or after. Personally, I think it'll happen after Christmas, but those GDP figures suggest that we do need interest rate reductions.
Inflation is another measure that we look at on this show regularly. Currently, 3.5%, Roy.
Yeah, target's 2.5% by the Reserve Bank, and you just want to see that they have shifted it. It's come off its high and it's headed in the right direction. So that's good news for lower interest rates.
You can see around this time 2 years ago, peaking at sort of above the 8%. So it's certainly been curtailed, and that's one of the reasons why, as we see on screen, Roy, because of those sharp interest rate rises since late 2022.
Yes, and we haven't seen any decrease yet, but certainly that's on the cards.
One measure that we look at on this show every time is consumer confidence. And you can see there a small decline, and economists predicting that this was off the back of the sluggish GDP growth number. So again, it's, you know, some of these economic indicators manifest more broadly in the community as pessimism, and that shows up in that consumer confidence number. And I want to give you a quote from a senior economist, Matthew Hassan, that says, "The pessimism that has dominated for over 2 years is still showing no signs of lifting." So if you look at this graph, the consumer confidence graph over the last 10 years, you can still see that it is comparatively a lot lower than where it was between 2015 and the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, so apart from the pandemic, we're at historical lows, which is quite surprising.
The other thing here that I wanted to draw attention to is how do we compare to the US as an example, a market that, you know, we tend to reflect, and you can see they also have some glimmers of confidence in the last couple of months. We're starting to see it slightly increase there in September. And if you look at the 10-year graph here, it also shows that it's below where it was 2015 to 2020. So some deep pessimism over the last 2 years. Their graph, I think, trends up slightly better than Australia's, though. So again, something for our government in Australia to address.
And interestingly, there's talk right now in the US that interest rates might drop, and that would be causing consumer confidence to grow a little bit.
Yes, that is a good point. Interest rates drop, more money in the pockets of mortgage holders. Roy, business confidence is another measure that we look at on this show, and this fell sharply in August. The reason put down to steep falls in recreation and personal services, which again linked to that consumer confidence number as well. Transport and utilities, construction and manufacturing. So that's a lot of categories, and a lot of decline in those categories has seen a sharp fall in business confidence.
And our last RJS TV was June, and we were looking at the May to June figures where it was negative and felt that it would improve. It did improve, but it's dropped suddenly in August, hasn't it?
It certainly has. One thing that dropped suddenly in August but has bounced back and resurrected itself is the ASX 200 index, and Roy, a milestone overnight.
Yeah, we've gone up again overnight, just prior to this slide being printed. But I've marked the 8,000 mark there because that's going to be the new benchmark. Now, we predicted in our last show, November last year, we actually predicted that we'd have somewhere around the 18% growth. We're currently at 13% on our way to 18. It was a bold prediction, I remember saying that. But we're just on 13 at the moment. We're just fractionally over 13 as of late last night. And I think we'll continue to see that and watch the 8,000, because I think we'll break the 8,000. We'll be heading off to 8,500 fairly quickly.
A pretty amazing bounce there. You can see August, there was a big correction. Any word on what happened there with August?
Yes, in the US. We followed the US, and the US had lower unemployment figures than expected, or lower job creation than expected, really. And that caused the stock market to dive very quickly. It dropped 2.6% in one day in the US, and we just followed suit, which we often do.
But a very fast correction there, and so well done to those who held.
And if you're looking at buying shares, you really need to get advice. Just don't go to the market. The graph you just saw was the top 200 shares. Get some advice, because imagine what you could make if you just bought the top 15 or the top 20.
RJS. RJSanderson.com.au if you want to get some advice. Median dwelling values kicks off our property discussion, Roy. And talk us through this one. This is median dwelling values over the last 5 years.
So we're shifting from the share market to property, and what's critical here is if you just look at Melbourne, Melbourne's median value has dipped, and many other states have actually gone above Melbourne, with the exception of none of them. They're all above Melbourne now in value, which says Melbourne's got a few problems happening.
Let's dive into that a little bit more deeply. The home value index, the cumulative change over the last 5 years paints a very grim picture for Melbourne property prices.
So Melbourne have grown just under 20% over 5 years, and look at the growth of some of the other states. Perth is 78% over 5 years. So this is a blight on Melbourne's property market right at the moment.
Particularly when you overlay that against what you just talked about with the ASX 200, 12% or almost 13% over the last year, you can see that the returns on the stock market versus the Melbourne property market far exceeding if you invested in the stock market there. The home value index, I mentioned it before, the last 3 months. Talk us through this one, Roy.
Yeah, so in 3 months, again, it's just supporting that Melbourne's in trouble. We've gone backwards in the last 3 months by 1.2%, more than any other state at all.
And then over 12 months, what does that picture tell us? Well, this Melbourne number is probably something that you're focusing on as well.
Yeah, correct. Down by 1% over the last 12 months. It just supports what I've been saying, which is the Melbourne property market's in all sorts of trouble, and I can't see that turning around.
Roy, it does beg the question, what is going on here in Victoria?
It does. And Victoria's standalone a little bit compared to some other states, because we've had some taxes that have been brought in that other states have not done, and it's all about Dan Andrews. We spent too much money. We paid for a Commonwealth Games to go somewhere else. We've spent money on a tunnel. We've had a warning on our credit rating from the authorities. And they're trying to build up their income, and the way they're doing that is they're hitting the property market. Yeah,
let's have a look at this next slide. It talks to a new tax here that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, this is the vacant land tax, and don't be confused. It says land, that's in the heading of the legislation, but it actually can be property, not just vacant land, but a property where nobody's living in it. And the first assessments are going to hit in February 2025. You don't pay the tax if it's a holiday home and you can prove that you're living in it for more than 30 days over the year. But if it's a short stay rental, like Airbnb, you need to be able to show that it is Airbnb for 6 months or more throughout the year. Now, I do a lot of tax returns for Airbnb and short stay, and very rarely do they get 6 months worth of accommodation. And this tax value, Dave, this is awful. 1% in the first year that's vacant, then it goes to 2% and then to 3%. That's just amazing. And it's not on the land value, it's actually on the improved value, and it doesn't replace the land tax that we've all been paying. It's on top of and additional to that.
So what's the net effect of something like this, Roy? What's this going to do?
This is going to force people to do one of two things. You either are forced to put the money on the full-time rental market, so it's rented full-time, which is what the government are hoping for, or you're going to put the property on the market. And there's a lot of properties, especially Mornington Peninsula and holiday destinations, where the family home that's been in the family for generations has gone on the market. And we're seeing that on the Mornington Peninsula.
Okay, well, interesting. We'll watch that space and see what happens with the taxes here in Victoria. One interesting graph that I did want to bring up, Roy, was new home loans in Australia. There is some encouraging numbers here. Now, again, this paints a national picture. So what we've seen through the previous property slides is that it is very bespoke to each state. Each state faces its own regulations and regulatory challenges and also regulatory concessions. So this number, though, is on the improve considerably. You can see there that new home loans approved in January 2024 were around the sort of 16.5K mark, now up above the 18.5K towards 19K. So home loans are being approved in greater quantity across Australia. Now, I wanted to also paint an interesting picture here of what's going on overseas. We've talked about the US. Have a look at this in China, Roy. This is new build house prices year on year, and they are in absolute decline. That's the 14th straight month of decreases and the steepest since May 2015. What do you reckon it'd be like here in Australia if we saw this kind of thing? House prices in free fall and due to an oversupply.
Due to an oversupply, immigration is making sure we don't have an oversupply. We have the absolute opposite to that. We have an undersupply, so house prices are going up as far as new builds are concerned. What
do you think it would be like if we saw massive, rapid decline in property values with political chaos, you'd think?
Yeah, bear in mind China was new builds, not existing. We're seeing decline in the Melbourne property market at the moment, and I think that'll continue because of government regulations. I can't see Australia having new builds going down in price because of cost pressures and cost of living pressures. I don't think that's going to happen in Australia.
Right, let's get into some tax tips, Roy. And the first one, it's an interesting one. It's around super. It says here for people with super balances under 500K and over the age of 60. And still working.
You might not realise it, but you can take 10% of your superannuation balance out. That's called a transition payment, transition to retirement payment. You can take it as a lump sum if you want, and you pay no tax on that money that you take out. Secondary, the same amount of money you can put back into super and claim as a tax deduction. The money out's tax-free, the money in's a tax deduction. But you've got to tick those three boxes: over 60, working, super balance under 500,000. Important that you do talk to an accountant or a wealth manager at RJS Wealth Management to get some information, education, and double check that you can actually do that.
Couple of tax questions that have come in from viewers that we want to put to you, Roy. First one, I commenced a new business in late 2024 and had costs of around $5,000, but no sales or income yet. Can I claim the cost against my normal employment income to increase my refund?
There was a time when the answer was yes, but the government or the tax office changed that. That's called a non-commercial loss. You don't lose the money completely. You carry it forward until you have a profit or a gain in that business. And it has to be that business. You can't offset it against a different business. So the answer is no, it does not increase your refund in the year you spend that money on the new business.
Interesting. Next question, another one from a viewer. I am considering setting up a self-managed super fund so I can purchase an investment property. Is there a minimum amount I need to start a self-managed super fund? What are the setup costs, and what tax rate does a super fund pay?
So a super fund can purchase an investment property. ASIC suggests that you need about $200,000 to set up a super fund, but keep in mind that a bank's only going to lend you around about 60% of the purchase price. So if you want to purchase $1 million property, you probably need somewhere around $400,000 in super combined between you and your partner. The tax rate in super, 15% while you're working. But if you did buy a property and you hold that until you retire, when you retire, Dave, the tax rate in your super is 0. So if you make a big capital gain over, say, a 10 or 20-year period on a property, you pay no tax in retirement. So that's brilliant. That's why so many people set up self-managed super funds to purchase property.
That's I'm sort of thinking on the fly here, Roy, but that's very interesting, particularly for young people who are not in the property market but may have been working and may have accumulated a substantial super. So I'm sort of thinking someone 35 to 45 who's in a relationship and has a combined total with their spouse of 400k super and are renting. This is potentially a way of circumventing having to get into the property market and securing a retirement?
Correct. This is for retirement. If they're renting, they can't live in that property. It's not allowed to be rented to a related party. But it just doesn't have to be partners as well. It could be you and I. You're allowed 6 people. So it could be you, your partner, me, my partner. We combine the 4 of us and we set up a self-managed super fund to buy an investment property because we want to sit on it for 15 or 20 years to make the capital growth.
Maybe we'll check out the Mornington Peninsula. There's a few going there, apparently.
There are, right at the moment.
And maybe some more favourable regulatory challenges or regulatory conditions in later times. Roy, I want to ask you this question. If you were the Treasurer today, what would you do?
I've got a number of laws that I would change, and they'll bring this slide up here, and I've listed them out. In actual fact, this list could have been 50, not 5. I believe that we should make residential investments in a self-managed super fund that we were just talking about be exempt from stamp duty and exempt from land tax. That will bring more properties into the rental market that we're trying to encourage. The capital gains tax discount of 50% is only available for people with assets under 6 million. That 6 million limit was invented 25 years ago, increased that to $10 million. I believe parking for nurses, prison guards and anybody who pays for parking wherever you work should be tax deductible, where at the moment parking where you work is not tax deductible unless you have to park at different venues. So especially nurses and prison guards, that would affect. I believe all training should be tax deductible. Forget about this, it has to relate to your current income. Make us a smarter country, make it tax deductible. And finally, the rate per hour for home office expenses is 67 cents. You can't be serious, ATO. That's meant to cover stationary mobile phone, light and power, internet. That is far too low on an hourly rate to cover all those costs. There is a cost of living crisis. That 67 cents should probably be about $1.30. So it needs to about double.
Wow, you've got a concise agenda that is very easy to understand. I like it. You know, you could sell that to the Australian people, I think, no doubt, Roy.
Well, we know the Treasurer listens to this show, so I'm sure that you'll see some of those become legislation eventually. And
the former Treasurer, he's also a big fan of the show, Mr. Frydenberg.
He is at that.
Let's get into Roy's Rage, another segment that we love. Where are you going this time, Roy? Roy's Rage. We've got it up on the screen now.
I've got a little bit of an irk here. Now, Apple, a worldwide company, set up a company in Ireland. They called it Apple Sales International. And in 1999, Ireland government reduced the tax rate from 32% to 12.5% to encourage companies like Apple to use Ireland as their base for all the worldwide sales of Apple phones, except the USA sales, because the USA made sure they didn't. There was 21 billion, that's B with a billion, was placed into an escrow pending a court outcome. Now the court has finally just been decided, and that 21 billion is now going to be paid to a number of countries in the EU, Economic Union. I'm not sure why Australia's missing out on some of that, but other companies, large companies that are using Ireland as their base to get a 12.5% rate include Facebook and Google. And I think that even though my mission as a tax consultant, a tax specialist, is to reduce all my clients' taxation requirements and what they have to pay, I don't believe it's morally correct or ethically to be shifting money to an offshore country when really you are only doing that to avoid paying tax in places like Australia, when it should be paid right here in Australia. And that's what irks me. So that's my rage.
I like it. I like it. It is a problem because, you know, those companies that you mentioned, you know, they're the companies that Australians are using every single day. And as you say, the sovereign wealth that should be flowing to Australia is not flowing there.
Yeah, and shifting profits to a country, Australia's at 30%, Ireland's at 12.5%. They still should pay their tax at 30% here in Australia.
Roy, we're running out of time here, but talk us through this accommodation voucher offer because it's a special one for those that are watching today.
Just for this month, just for this edition of RJS TV, if you mention this accommodation voucher, if you are shifting your company, your family trust or your self-managed super fund to RJS, then mention this voucher and we'll send you a $1,000 accommodation voucher, which is all tax-free.
Fantastic. We love a shout out as well. And this month it is Your Brand Unleashed. Roy, I've seen this one before, and it's the Melody Bluetooth beanie that always captures my attention.
Yes, I think the beanie is awesome. But the point of this slide is that this is a great organisation. The products they have are very top quality. And if you want to have some sort of Christmas gifts for your corporates or your clients, then get in now and order so that you can have them all delivered before Christmas and branded with your name on them.
Roy, it's been a fantastic episode and edition of RJS TV. Any predictions ahead of October?
Well, I'm hoping that we have some consumer confidence bouncing back. I don't expect interest rates to change until just after Christmas. I could be proven wrong as soon as we get an inflation rate released, but we'll see. And I think the share market's going to continue bubbling along because as soon as the US drop interest rates, I think the share market in the US and therefore Australia will jump up again. I think the share market over the next 12 months is going to be excellent, and I think property is going to continue to decline, especially in Victoria.
rjsanderson.com.au. Make sure you get some wealth management advice. Thank you, Roy. And thanks to everyone at home watching. This has been RJ Sanderson TV. We'll see you next month.